Hey folks, thanks again for watching. This is Pro Libertate, and today I wanted to discuss this article I came across from the Federalist. And this is on why the Star Wars franchise's decline is a true loss for American culture. And it had some really good themes in it. It's by this gentleman named David Breitenbock. I think that's how you say his name. And it has some themes that I myself have seen in the movies and art over the years in our postmodern context in which we're in. And the death of Star Wars does not occur in a vacuum. There's people with very clear ideologies that are creating this sort of art and these sorts of stories. And so this article hits on a number of these themes, and so I figured I'd read it and just kind of riff on them as we go along. If it were only Star Wars being destroyed, we might pass over it as a mere unfortunate mistake. But hardly a major fictional franchise or character remains that has not suffered from Marvel Comics to James Bond. From what I understand, before we continue, they're planning to do a Jane Bond, something like that. So another deconstruction, right? So we're going to replace 007 with 0077 cents on the dollar, I guess, right? This oppressed woman or something. And we saw it with Ghostbusters, all-female Ghostbuster staff, the Oceans 15 or 17 or 19 or whatever it was. I don't know. I never saw it. Never saw any of these movies. And all these were failures. And I think they were talking about Indiana Jones as well. That kind of a thing. So just on that theme. And let's continue, though. At this year's annual Disney Fan Expo D23, a new special look trailer was released for the upcoming Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, the third film in the sequel trilogy kicked off by 2015's The Force Awakens and continued in 2017's The Last Jedi. Both of these movies are truly terrible from a writing perspective, although the latter film is much worse. While clumsily undoing and undermining everything that happened in the original films, including some stunningly wrong-headed choices regarding the main characters. Absolutely. He hits the nail on the head there. And the problem, The Force Awakens, I was willing to overlook a lot of the problems at first. And it wasn't until I saw The Last Jedi that I also saw The Force Awakens as being bad. And so the problem in The Force Awakens was, again, we have this Mary Sue character of Rey, who has zero room for character growth. Everything she does, she's an instant expert at. Whatever she puts her hands to, she's the best. So there's that really awful scene where she gets on the Millennium Falcon with Han Solo and Chewbacca. And she instantly knows more about the Millennium Falcon than Han Solo and Chewbacca. The characters who literally spent their lives on this ship. She knows more about it than them. She's able to fix it. And there's just this idiotic scene where, Han basically tilts his hat to the strong, independent woman. Like, wow, I guess she's better than us. So, she's instantly better than them at that. She fights Kylo Ren at the end of The Force Awakens, and she has never wielded a lightsaber in her life, and she's better than this guy who's been training his entire life as a Jedi. She's able to resist his mind tricks, all this stuff. Just like that. No training, nothing. And it only gets worse in The Last Jedi. And I really hated what they did to Han Solo in The Force Awakens. Basically, the Han Solo story arc from the original films was this, rough around the edges guy, slash dubious character, who really has a heart of gold underneath it all. And he joins the rebellion, and he's integral to the success of the rebellion against the Empire, right? He's the reluctant hero, the guy who discovers his own heroism and commitment to the good. So he had a great story arc. When we meet him in The Force Awakens, before he's killed off, Han Solo is again back to being this loser. He's back to being, he's even worse than that. He's a deadbeat dad. We don't really know whatever happened between him and Leia. We just know that they're not together anymore. And he's back to just being this loser scumming around the galaxy. Just terrible. So they undo his character. And they do the same thing to Luke in The Last Jedi, which was even worse, I thought, because it was basically a whole movie dedicated to destroying Luke. And with Han Solo in The Force Awakens, these little data points are just kind of there. Anyway, a rundown of their flaws could easily fill an entire book. They are some of the most hollow and incompetently written films you will ever see. This has resulted in severe fracturing of the franchise's massive fan base between those who try to defend the films and those who loathe them. I am clearly in the latter category now. Like I said, I was willing to accept The Force Awakens at first, but after The Last Jedi and the destruction of Luke and the continuance of Rey's Mary Sue type character, it was just too much. And The Last Jedi was just so awful that, I mean, and it undid the stuff even in The Force Awakens that was okay. It undid all of those themes. So it's just tons of videos on this already. I don't need to rehash all of this. Star Wars is on its deathbed. Appallingly, Disney and Lucasfilms, with the help of sympathetic journalists, have cheerfully fanned the flames of this divide, and thus have shielded themselves by encouraging the idea that some fans hate the films on account of their political or social biases, or the race or sex of the main characters, or simply as a sign of the viewer's immaturity. The term toxic fandom has entered the mainstream as if it's the viewer's fault they don't like the films. Excellent point again. This is very true. This is the way it's been going now whenever fans complain about how a film destroys characters or undoes story arcs, character arcs, and all of that. You're just a toxic fan, right? It's not a problem with the writing. It's not a problem with them cramming their political ideology in there. No, it's a problem with the fans and their ideology, right? I don't care if about strong female leads. As another video on my channel here attests, my favorite movie from this year was Alita Battle Angel. Strong female lead. That's how you do it, though. You don't do it like Rey, right? Who has zero room to growth. In Alita, her character has to grow through self-knowledge. She has to figure out who she is. Her character has to grow in understanding the world around her. What is going on in the world? What are the conflicts that she needs to engage in? And lastly, she has to figure out a mission. How to engage the evil that she discovers is around her. So, and she figures all these things out. So there's a lot of character growth in Alita Battle Angel. And it's a beautiful story. None of that could be said about Rey. Okay? That's why we don't like Rey. It's because she's a flat, one-dimensional character. She's a Mary Sue. And that's not sexist. It's that she's just a terrible, flat character with zero growth. She's literally the best at everything she does. She even bests the person she went to for teaching, Luke Skywalker. She punks him when they're on the island, making him look like a boob and a fool. So the problem isn't the fans, it's the writing. But this is a nice deflection technique from people on the left. You know, whenever there's a complaint about something they do or say, it's actually a problem with the person raising the complaint, not the thing they're complaining about. The result of all this is that Star Wars, as a film franchise, is dying, if not already dead. Solo became the first film in the franchise to lose money, and interest in the upcoming third film is comparatively low, with the full trailer not even due out until this month. To destroy what was perhaps the world's most valuable cinematic intellectual property in less than 5 years is admittedly an impressive achievement, perhaps the sole impressive thing about what is now known as the Disney era. Absolutely true. From just speaking from my own anecdotal experience, I had zero interest after The Last Jedi, and so I didn't see Solo. We eventually did, and when it was free on Netflix, we watched it, and it was okay as far as the film is to be considered on its own. It was okay. It was okay. That was not a terrible film. It was just okay. After The Last Jedi, I had zero interest, and I'm probably not going to see this one in the theater either because I don't want to give these guys my money. I'm not going to see this Rise of Skywalker in the theater just because I don't want to give them my money, and that's just simply out of principle. I did see up until The Last Jedi. I'd seen all of these new Star Wars movies in the theater. When I was walking out of the theater with my children after seeing The Last Jedi, my first comment to them was, "This movie was just absolutely terrible," and we rehearsed in the van on the way home the reasons why. And anyway, the imaginative power of Star Wars IP has been systematically stripped away into a confused and contradictory mess loaded down with contemporary politics. The simple yet rich story of the originals, and even of the prequels for all their faults, now suffers from a soulless and pointless tumor that grinds the rich characters of the originals into the dirt in order to set up hollow new ones. So what, you might ask? Why does this matter? It's just a fantasy film franchise. There are other more important things in the world. Who cares? Evidently, quite a few people care, because here is why it matters. And this is what I really like about this article. I'm a big picture guy, and I love articles like this where somebody's able to take a particular data point and see a big picture of what's going on culturally. We're losing wholesome entertainment. In the first place, in practical terms, this means the loss of yet another source of wholesome and uplifting entertainment. Not much of that remains in mainstream American culture. This is important because the stories we tell and listen to affect how we see the world. They are part of how we communicate values and ethics. They are part of how we pass our understanding of life and humanity, and they are an essential element of the continuity of culture. Let's pause there. That is so rich and such an important point. In the past, in written prehistoric type cultures, I guess I should say, before stories were really written down, the way a culture was maintained was through the elders and the people rehearsing stories for the people that gave them direction and guidance, and this is the case as well when story began to be written. The way a culture was maintained through was a common story, a common heritage, a common narrative, I should say, that the culture was glued together with, and ultimately that's the case with like the Christian story. That's what glued Western culture together for almost 2 millennia, right? And in this recent hiccup of postmodernity now, we're in a post-Christian, post-Christendom type culture. We're losing any cultural cohesion now, right? Nihilism and existential subjectivity seems to reign. And that's why we're seeing the loss of heroes and wholesome, good stories. A hopeful tale of good triumphing over evil, leavened by rich characters driven by familial love, courage, and decency, and bounded over by a mystical power delineating good and evil, cannot but have a positive effect on its audience as a whole. It isn't the best story possible, nor the only source, but in terms of mainstream media, there are precious few such stories left, and they grow fewer every day. Absolutely. And the stories that are coming out now are more and more these anti-hero type stories. So just take that Maleficence story. So now we're focused on the evil witch in Snow White. Now we're more interested in the bad guys. We're more interested in what drives evil, okay, than good conquering evil. We want to hear about what makes the bad guys tick. What traumas occurred in their lives that made them so wicked and evil. I don't really care. Evil just needs to be defeated, not sympathized with, not empathized with, right? But in our postmodern culture, where we no longer have clear distinctions between good and evil anymore. I mean, we can't even tell the difference between boys and girls, for that matter. But in our postmodern culture, where these lines have been broken down, and there's nothing but subjectivity and personal preferences that reign, now all of a sudden, we have sympathy for the devil. Now all of a sudden, we want to hear stories about, what actually made the Joker tick. Let's look at the depths of the evil that made up the character of the Joker, rather than how can we stop this madman. We want to intimately become acquainted with the madman. Anyway, Star Wars was an atavism in its own time. I'm not familiar with that term. A throwback to an earlier, this is probably the definition, a throwback to an earlier, more hopeful trend in Hollywood, in contrast to the grim nihilistic fare that was all the rage in the late 70s. It sparked a renaissance of that kind of storytelling. This was like the 80s, okay? This is what birthed all those really cool films in the 80s that people just love, right? But now we are in an arguably worse state of affairs. In our day, mainstream media is increasingly preaching a social political agenda. No hope, no uplift, no joy is permitted. Only instruction. Just constant hectoring, absolutely. Something that made people happier and better, something that helped communicate a healthy understanding of the world, has now been gutted for the sake of scoring political points. That matters. Absolutely. Absolutely. Star Wars no longer transcends politics. In the process, not only is a source of joy and cultural transmission eliminated, but also one of the few unifying cultural artifacts we had left. It used to be whatever your political, religious, social views, whatever your skin color, sex, you could still talk about Star Wars and find common connection with your fellow fans. The stories cut across the petty concerns of the day to touch on universal ideas that anyone could enjoy and find meaning in. Well, this is the very problem, though. We've given up on universals, right? There's no universal anymore. Our universities aren't universities, right? They're basically pluriversities, right? Or something like that. Multiversities. We don't believe in university anymore. We don't believe in universals. We've given up on that. We believe in multiversity, right? So that's the problem. That is no longer the case, thanks to the new films and the behavior of the filmmakers, Kathleen Kennedy, Rian Johnson, and others. Not only made terrible films, but subsequently hid from criticism by implying or outright claiming the fans didn't like their product only because of the demographics of the actors involved or of their immaturity, right? So they just ran to this was just a bunch of angry, toxic white males. Your typical stuff now, right? Really tiresome stuff that's just become flat out boring and uninteresting to hear, to the point now where everybody just laughs at it. I mean, when this is agreed upon by the gatekeepers as being this horrible symbol, nobody can take you seriously anymore. I mean, Kathleen Kennedy, when she took over Star Wars, her and her little buddies, they were all seen wearing these shirts that said, "The Force is female," right? So they had a clear political agenda in mind. They had a clear worldview that they were going to cram into the films. And the Force is female t-shirts, you can look it up on Google Images, conveyed that message perfectly loud and clear to everyone willing to listen. They were going to put feminism in these films. What was driving the reason why they wanted a female lead was their feminism. Not because They thought they could create a strong female lead, but they wanted to just cram it down everybody's throat. They ignored the many substantive criticisms. Johnson famously said he wouldn't change anything about the film in favor of holding up any comments on race or politics as representative of the film's critics. They implied their fans are racist, sexist man-babies, while inserting overt political messages in the films themselves. And in so doing, they sowed suspicion, division, and bitterness among their fans. The result is that one of the few remaining places where Americans could meet on common ground is gone. That matters. Yeah. Movies are no substitute for institutions, but still matter. We live in a fragmented, broken society. The humanizing and directing forces of religion, family, nation, and community are all gone. But for most people, In the face of this famine, many people have turned to pop culture for sources of meaning and identity they lack in the world. Well, that's problematic. But anyway. This situation may in itself be lamentable, yes, and even the best work of popular fiction is a poor substitute for church, family, or flag. Well, if these works were falling to make way for something higher and better, that may be one thing, but they aren't. They are falling, and nothing is replacing them. Nothing but the foul, dehumanizing influence of politics. The same brand of politics, I may add, that is destroying those higher influences in the first place. In other words, you could liken the situation to a man being despoiled of all he owned, save a single toy of sentimental value. Then the same robbers who despoiled him of his valuables broke the toy, and in answer to his laments, replied that a grown man shouldn't play with toys anyway. I like that. It is the prophet Nathan's story of the man with the lamb. Even if the fantasy franchise was not really worth much in itself, for many people, it was still all they had left in terms of sane, wholesome, uplifting influences. You killed it, and then laughed at them for caring. I love that. That's so good. It's absolutely true. Oh, you're just a bunch of man babies. Like, what are you implying that people shouldn't care about these films that you're creating? The fact that they're upset shows that they cared. Like I said in my previous video on this, I didn't realize how much I actually liked the character of Luke Skywalker until they destroyed it. Until they destroyed his character arc and who he was as a person and made him this nihilistic hermit that's given up on the fight. Right? I didn't realize how much I actually liked Luke until they did that. I always thought my favorite character in the Star Wars universe was Han Solo. I mean, as I saw The Last Jedi, I realized, I think it was actually Luke, because what they did to Luke pissed me off way more than what I saw them do to Han Solo. Even though as an adult I intellectually enjoyed the character of Han Solo better, it was, the destruction of Luke that really bothered me. That's what just, it pissed me off. I was annoyed at the destruction of Han Solo, but the destruction of Luke, that set me off. Many franchises are falling apart. If it were only Star Wars being destroyed in this way, we might pass over it as a mere unfortunate mistake. These things do happen. It isn't only Star Wars, however. It is everywhere. Hardly a major fictional franchise or character remains that has not suffered this process, from DC and Marvel Comics to Ghostbusters to James Bond. Absolutely. I think we're going to see the destruction of Marvel in the future. It's going to get really bad. So be prepared. Be prepared for that. We're going to see Marvel go full SJW. They're probably, you're going to see it. The Marvel films held out for a long time, but then came the execrable Captain Marvel, which followed the Lucasfilm playbook almost exactly. make a terrible, franchise-devastating film, and then imply fans are acting in bad faith when they don't like it. They are now laying plans to follow the hyper-politicized plan of the comics, spelling doom for the franchise. More and more, the stories people grew up with, the stories that meant something to them, are being destroyed by a combination of bad writing and politicization, leaving a saddened, confused, and divided audience behind them, and shutting off the few refuges from our increasingly divided political scene. Finally, on top of all the concerns already raised, there is simply the fact that quality does not need to justify its own existence. Whenever something that once was great, whatever it might be, is destroyed, the world is much poorer for it. The fall of Star Wars, or Marvel, or Disney itself, is the fall of something that once was great. The elimination of a unique ornament upon human culture. To respond by asking, "Who cares?" is only to reveal the emptiness of our own souls. As G.K. Chesterton put the answer into the mouth of Alfred long ago, "For our God hath blessed creation, calling it good, I know. What spirit with whom you blindly band hath blessed destruction with his hand? Yet by God's death stars shall stand, and the small apples grow." It's a beautiful sentiment, and absolutely true. So everything becomes political now. That's because that's the left's God, right? So they have their little salvation story, and they're going to cram it into everything. Salvation is derived not through God, through a savior on a cross. It's derived through legislation in Congress. The ills of the world will be healed. The healing of the nations take place in the halls of government, not on a cross 2,000 years ago. And so the stories being told in such a context by people with that sort of an outlook inevitably have to be political, right? So it is a sad thing. But it also is an opportunity. It's not all bad. That's the one major complaint I would levy against this article. And I don't think he would necessarily disagree. It's just wasn't his point in the article. I would just add the big caveat that it's not hopeless. This actually is a great time for writers. The fact that the big guys are basically committing seppuku and falling on their own swords to sacrifice themselves in the name of social justice and being politically correct and saying all the right things and being on the right side of history. The fact that they're willing to destroy their franchises in the name of these irrelevant causes is an opportunity for you as a writer. It's an opportunity for other storytellers to step up into the void that's being made by these people. They've given up, right? So rather than just sitting on the sidelines and bemoaning the ebb in our cultural situation, it's actually an opportunity. It's an opportunity for independent people to step up and fill that void with goodness, to fill the void with the true, the good, and the beautiful. Thanks again for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you enjoy this stuff, leave a comment below if you got anything to add. And take care.